great evening to ya. It's your girl Key, second time trying. Hopefully this time will be a success. So just a quick live to tell you that I've written another blog where I'm talking about text from an ex, and I think this is a topic that is particularly noteworthy as we all experienced lockdown and the challenges that come from being in a position that, you know, our freedom is restricted. We're being told what and what we can't do, and that's not necessarily easy. However, you may have noticed, whether you're single, well, hopefully you'll be single rather than in a relationship, but how do you deal with texts from exes, especially if you care about that person or that relationship didn't work out? How have you been able to cope with that? Has that been easy for you? Do you find it challenging? What questions do you have when someone crawls out the woodwork after maybe not hearing from them for years? Do you feel challenged, or are you someone who, when it's over, it's over? The challenge is, the reality of it is this is a big one for many of us. And often what can happen if we're not mindful, if we're not careful, is we can, there is a massive benefit to us being very clear about what happens when we engage with X person. Otherwise, what's likely to happen is we engage with that person and then we get drawn into situations that are not helpful for us. So when you get a text from an ex, what I encourage you to do is you need to step away from the device. Step away, take time out so that you can think about the decision that you make moving forward. For so many of us, especially my empaths, we can be very reactionary. And when we're reactionary, it can often mean we don't always give our decision-making process the time it needs. This is especially important if you're highly emotional. For some of us, if you get a text from an ex and it's someone you still care about, it's someone you want to be in relationship with, it can be very difficult. It can be difficult to say no if you are someone who struggles to say no to that person. Because remember, in other areas of your life, you may well be doing absolutely fine, but there might be a dynamic with you and that person for whatever reason that you struggle to say no. So if you're someone, you're single, you've had a text from an ex and you feel challenged by that, you're not sure what to do, feel free to inbox me. I've written an article and I'm gonna put that here, which is called Text from an Ex. And basically the ethos of the article is basically saying that if you receive a text from an ex, then it puts you at a crossroads. Now, if you don't care about them, it's not a big deal. Obviously, if you get a text from a random ex and you don't have feelings for them, it's not a big deal. Lock it off. However, if you have feelings for that person, if you had hopes, aspirations for that relationship that didn't come to fruition, you will be challenged. And in my view, many others would agree, it's best that you take time before you react. Often, especially if you're empathic, if you're drawn by your feelings, you'll have an emotional reaction. And that can often mean that we can sometimes make a regrettable decision about whether we engage with that person. There is much wisdom in pausing, considering, and taking appropriate action so that you don't keep going down a road that you've been down before. Now, if that's your history, that you keep repeating unhealthy cycles, either in your intimate relationships or with a specific person, then know when they come crawling out of the woodwork, you are being challenged. And when you are being challenged, you have to be kind of like very clear about the choices that you make. Often, one of the biggest challenges we have when we are in that predicament is fear. Fear can get a hold of us. Plus, a lot of us are wedded to the fantasy of how a relationship should be. So we have an idea or a hope or often a fantasy about how that relationship should be. So if you have that text from the ex that comes back, you need to be very clear with yourself about, listen, if you want to go and get your boots rocked, if you need a little bit of cuddle time, that's your choice. But you have to be very mindful about the nature of the person you're dealing with. If they're controlling, if they're manipulative, you have to be careful, especially if you're an empath, because we know empaths, we're too soft. We're too soft sometimes. We don't know how to say no. And if you're not careful, if you're with someone who's highly manipulative, they'll end up taking your kindness for weakness. And that is just one way how your mental health will deteriorate. So we have to be careful. If you have a friends with benefits relationship with someone and that works for you, and maybe you ain't heard from them in a time, and now all of a sudden you hear from them and you might need some jiggy, make your choice, but be woke about what you're doing. If you have a random text from someone and you care about them and the relationship hasn't been healthy, yet a part of you still wants that relationship, a part of you still has hopes and aspirations for that relationship, now you're at a crossroads. And we need to be mindful about the choices we make when we're at crossroads. Often we have a strong resistance to change, yeah? Humans can often resist change because there's a part of our brain that likes familiarity and the same old, because life becomes predictable. However, we can't grow in the same old comfort zones. So we have to be very mindful about the choices that you make. If you get a text from an ex, you still have feelings for that person, but for whatever reason, that relationship cannot flourish and the relationship does not grow. If you have any questions about this, ask me before I go, because the sun's soon set. Then you need to be thinking about how best you look after yourself. The reality is, it's a harsh reality, but no one's coming to save you. You have to learn to be your own best friend. We have to know when we're dealing with people who are not good for us. And sometimes, some of us have indulged in people that haven't been good for us, and some of us have been burnt for it. The maturer you get, my hope is that you want to make more wise movements. And sometimes you have to learn to differentiate. So even though you have an emotional pull to somebody, emotionally you'll want to engage with them, or you'll want to give the relationship another try. Wisdom, if we step away from the device, give ourselves a little space, don't just react, means that we can maybe make a rational decision that isn't based on our emotions. So if you're a very emotional person, you have to be careful of that. Your emotions are a wonderful thing. You have a lot of love to give, you're caring and considerate, but there's also a shadow side to that. And it can mean in certain situations when we have to make a decision for our own well-being, we let our emotions take over, and that can be how we end up going back into situations that ain't great for us. Actually, some of the situations we go back into, that stuff ain't even great for our mental health. You be going to the doctors asking for pills, but the reality is you ain't blocking people in your phone. You ain't blocking people who ain't good for you. And that's your responsibility. No doctors, none of them are going to be asking you about who's up in your phone, who's on your WhatsApp, who just last ring you. They're not asking you about these types of things. So it's up to you to be your own best friend. Otherwise, people will take downright liberties with you. Now, if you want to link up with your ex and you're open for that, it's a safe person, that's your choice. However, if you're dealing with someone who's complex and your relationship hasn't been helpful, or you still have feelings for that person, you need to be wise about what you choose to do. Because often, and I believe this, and people don't like it, but you know what? I'm not here to give you the comfortable truth. I'm here to say what I see and what I know. And if that resonates with you, that's wonderful. The true reality is we create our reality. We create our reality via the vehicle of our choices. The choices we make shape our reality. And if you are longing to be in a committed 50-50 healthy relationship, that's a wonderful thing. However, if you keep tolerating and indulging in nonsense or superficial relationship, one-dimensional relationships, and you get frustrated because you don't have the relationship you deserve, your challenge isn't about the relationship you deserve. Your biggest challenge is the fact that you can't reject what you don't want. Ooh. Yeah, that's the real one. Yeah, Your issue isn't the ambition you have for a healthy, wholesome relationship. The biggest challenge you have is you can't reject what does not work for you. And because it's often a familiar pain, you'll go back in the same cycle with the same people, doing the same thing and getting the same kind of one-way relationship where you often give but don't get back in return. And this is why I'm such an advocate that empaths learn how to protect their gifts. Because if you don't learn to protect your gift, you're going to be highly vulnerable, and you're going to be vulnerable to yourself. You know, that's why empaths who aren't woke, you're a danger to yourself. You'll give to the point of exhaustion. You'll give and you'll put yourself in a vulnerable position. You'll give and you'll have no boundaries, and people will target you and use you for their own gain, and it will mash you up, and you'll develop a whole raft of problems from anxiety, stress, depression, a whole raft of health conditions as well, because we know if we know stress compromises the immune system. So you're also going to be looking at things potentially like irritable bowel syndrome. We're also going to be looking at things like grinding of teeth, ulcers. All of these things manifest into physical symptoms. So you may think, oh, Key, you're always banging on about intimate relationships. I'll always bang on about intimate relationships, because that is where we make ourselves vulnerable to another human being. And we live in this culture of friends with benefits, don't want no commitment and all of that stuff, which is not great for us. But some of us are engaging in those relationships, and it's not good for us. It hurts you. And that's why you have to learn to be your own best friend. As you go up in age, you have to learn to say no to what doesn't work for you. You have to learn to be your own best friend. Because if you don't have to worry about the people that have hurt you. You don't have to worry about enemies outside of you. The person who's your worst enemy is in the mirror. It is yourself. And I know you don't want that for yourself, because you've got to learn to be your own best friend. Because I know I did. That's why I like a block feature. Sometimes I'll be having a block party. Sometimes we need to use our device for our greater good. And the people have put block on there for a reason. Some of us need to use it. So when they feel like they can just come out the woodwork and test the waters to see if they can get a little na from you, we need to let them know, not now, not today, not ever. That's your duty. It's your girl Key. I'm going to be signing off and taking myself home. If you have any questions, if anything I've said has resonated with you, or you'd like a little private chat, inbox your girl Key. I'm here to be of service. Take care of you. Because if you don't, who you think's coming to save you? No one's coming to save you. So you have to learn to be your own best friend. Take care of you.